Welcome, fellow Stardust. Are you ready for a scare? Thank you for stopping by my channel. My name is DeRay, lover of all things dark, creepy, and weird. Today, I'll be talking about family annihilator John List. I'll be telling his story while showing you how I did these nails. I hope you enjoy. And I mean no disrespect to any of the families mentioned in today's story. I simply am fascinated by cases like these and do research on them, and then I like to share my findings. So John List was born in Bay City, Michigan. He was the only child of his parents, and so he was immensely doted over by his mother. His father made sure he understood the importance of hard work and being self-sustaining. To them, being poor or, not being able to take care of your family was considered a sin. John was a quiet child. He never shared his feelings. His father was a Sunday school teacher, and he later became a Sunday school teacher as well. In 1943, he enlisted into the military, and at the end of World War II in 1945, he was deployed to Germany. The next year, he got his degree in business administration, and then a few years later, he was called back to active duty and was relocated to Virginia, where he met his future wife, Helen Taylor, and her daughter, Brenda. They got married after only 3 months. They thought she was pregnant. When they got married, they found out that she wasn't. He thought she had lied and manipulated him just to get him to marry her. But being the good Christian man that he was, he decided to set it aside and make the best of a bad situation. But this simmered in him for years to come. They had their first child in 1954, and he wasn't able to hold down a job. He was moving around from job to job and having to move the family around, and he was starting to think that he was going to always be a failure. In 1960, Helen's daughter, Brenda, ends up getting married and moves out. A little while later, John finally lands a job as VP and comptroller at a bank in New Jersey. Now he's finally starting to feel like things are turning around. He couldn't enjoy the victory for just a little bit because his wife demanded that he buy a 19-room mansion in New Jersey called the Breeze Knoll. He couldn't afford this mansion, so he ended up having to borrow the money for the down payment from his mother. So he and his mother and wife and 3 children were living in this huge mansion. While his mom is a bit overbearing, his life is made that much worse by his wife, who is an alcoholic and is verbally abusive. She contracted syphilis from her ex-husband, who had died in the Korean War, and she hadn't told John. Her advanced syphilis and alcoholism caused her to be very unstable. They didn't talk to any neighbors, and they were considered shut-ins. John List was the guy known to mow his lawn in his suit. But of course, after only 1 year, John is yet again fired from his job. But this time, he does not tell his family. Instead, he ends up just dressing up for work like he normally would. He goes to the train station and then sits there and reads the newspaper all day until it's time to go home. He begins to take money from his mother's bank account in order to pay for the mortgage, while all the other bills start to pile up. The family doesn't think that anything is amiss. He does this for 5 years, y'all, until in 1971, he's faced with bankruptcy. He contemplates committing suicide, but he doesn't want to go to hell. But he also can't have his family on welfare, because that would be a sin. So on November 9th, 1971, John wakes up, has breakfast with the kids, and they go to school. In an interview, he says that he was trying to act as normal as possible so that they wouldn't suspect a thing. After the kids went off to school, he went up and got his 2 guns. His automatic 9mm, that was his father's, as well as a .22 caliber that he used in the war. He walks into the kitchen where his wife is having her morning coffee. He shoots her in the back of the head. He then goes up to the 3rd floor where his mother was, greets her with a kiss, and then shoots her in the back of the head as she is walking away. He then collects important documents and family photos. He cuts his image out of every family photo and then begins to write 5 letters. One letter is to the children's school, letting them know that they'll be in North Carolina visiting family for the next month. One to his insurance agent, one to the mansion's estate, and another one to his pastor at his church. His daughter was interested in acting, and so in the letter to his pastor, he talks about how the 70s were a sinful time and kids were succumbing to temptation. Acting was a sin, and he saw too much evil in the world and had to kill to save them. He, quote, says, "But because of a number of reasons, I couldn't see any other solution. I just couldn't support them anymore, and I didn't want them to go into poverty. Also, at this time, I know that they could all be Christians. I couldn't be sure of that in the future as the children grew up." He then goes to the post office to mail these letters and to stop his mail until further notice. After running his little errand, he comes home and makes himself a sandwich for lunch. He cleans up his mess along with his wife's blood because he didn't want his family to come home and see the blood everywhere. He said at this point, he had no remorse. There was no stopping at this point. First to come home was his daughter Patricia, who was 16. When she entered the kitchen, he shot her in the back of the head. When his youngest, Frederick, who was 13, came home, he did the same, shot him in the back of the head. He didn't want them to feel any pain or know what was happening. And finally, there was John Jr., who had a soccer game that afternoon. John went to the soccer game, watched the soccer game, and then when they got home, he attempted to shoot him the same way he had the others. But something happened and he ended up having to shoot him 10 times. There was a bit of a scuffle, or he might have turned around right before the first shot. Nobody really knows. He then puts all the bodies into a sleeping bag on the 3rd floor in the ballroom. He then goes and feeds the fish in the 20-gallon fish tank and then goes to bed as if everything is normal. The next morning, he puts the thermostat at 52 degrees, thinking that this is going to preserve the bodies. He then parks his car at the airport and takes a train to Michigan, then takes another train to Denver, Colorado, where he becomes a cook at a hotel restaurant, then later becomes an accountant at a company. It takes an entire month for anybody to find the bodies. Patricia's drama teacher felt that something just wasn't right. He said that before, Patricia had mentioned that if her father were to ever take the family on a long vacation, that he had probably killed them. It took a while for anybody to believe him, but he finally got a staff member to agree to go out to their house to check on Patricia. It was then when neighbors finally took notice and called the police when they saw the teachers walking around the house. This sparks a nationwide manhunt. Because John had cut out his face out of all the family photos, they had no recent pictures to go off of to look for him. So he would go missing for 18 years. The New Jersey police cannot let this go. They continue to search the entire 18 years. They're asking anybody and everybody if they have any kind of information. They do their best working with the local news authorities, but they come up with no new leads. So in 1985, John List is living a whole new life as Robert Peter Clark. This is a name that he took from a school classmate from back in the day. He's living a quiet life. He likes to garden and watch TV. So the New Jersey police actually approached America's Most Wanted. This show had only been around a year at the time. This was their last hope. However, the show turned them down, and turned them down many times because there was really no chance in finding this guy because it had been too long and they didn't know what he looked like. After 9 months, they were finally able to convince them to do the case. Funny enough, John List actually loved this show and always was curious to know if his story would ever appear on the show. Sure enough, it did. So in 1989, they finally covered his story on America's Most Wanted. But because they didn't know what he looked like, they had to bring in a forensic artist to sculpt a bust of what he might look like. So he looked at pictures of his parents and just predicted what he would look like. And one special thing that sticks out is that this artist predicted that John List would be wearing thick frames, unlike his thin frames that he wore before. He didn't believe he would be wearing contact lenses because he didn't think that John List was that vain. Not even 2 weeks go by and John gets a knock on his door. The police got a call from an old neighbor in Colorado who said that their old neighbor could have been John and that he had moved to Virginia. When the police arrive in Virginia, his wife answers the door, but she believes innocent. So she sends them to his job where he was at the time, where he denies being John List. Even after they fingerprint him, he still denies that he is John List. John List mentions that he was actually watching when his case aired on America's Most Wanted with his wife, and he was sitting there hoping that she wouldn't recognize him and figure it out. And for whatever reason, she doesn't. While on trial, John really tries to put the blame on his abusive wife and abusive childhood. He talks about how she compared his sex to her ex-husband, the one who gave her syphilis in the first place, and how he didn't even know she had it until it was really bad. A court-appointed psychiatrist diagnosed John with OCD, and he really tries to play this up. The OCD essentially gives him only 2 options, which were murder or to go on welfare. And we all know, according to John, going on welfare is a sin. While the judge would have liked to have given John List the death penalty, the murders happened in 1971, before the death penalty was reinstated in New Jersey. So instead, he was given 5 consecutive life sentences. When he died of pneumonia in 2008, his second wife did not answer the call to come pick up his body. Nobody did for a while. Finally, when they did, they buried his body next to his mother. John List is known as a family annihilator, a very specific type of killer, and there are 2 kinds. The first kind will murder their family when they try to escape. The second kind will kill their family to save their reputation or their own reputation. They feel that they are shielding them from shame or hardship. And 81% of these types of killers will also kill themselves. And an interesting fact, a year after the murders, the mansion was burned down. And in the ballroom where he had stored the bodies was an original signed Tiffany piece of stained glass that was worth over $100,000, which would have been enough to tide him over to the next job after getting fired from the last one. Well, there you have it, the story of family annihilator John List. If you liked this video, I hope you hit the like button and join me next week Thursday when I post a film review on one of my favorite films, Bug. On Friday, I'll also be posting a spooky story narration. Until then, you can check out my video I posted yesterday, a film review on House of a Thousand Corpses. And if you want to join the Rainbow Fright Freight Train, go ahead and hit that subscribe button along with the notification bell. That way you'll get notified every Thursday and Friday when I post more videos like this. All right, y'all. Peace.